promoting businesses and organizations to help them reach their full potential. Lighten the path to the success of your business. Enhancing the lives of our listeners by talking about things that matters most. Helping you to shine your light emotionally, mentally, spiritually, socially, and physically. Spreading positive vibes. You've got it locked and you're listening to Light Vibrations, brought to you by Lyte Communications right here on CBN Radio 90.9 FM. And now your host and our director, Natasha Letza.
Hello, you've got it locked and you're listening to me, Tasha T, here, bringing to you another episode of Light Vibrations here in the studios. Today, returning with us, we have Dr. June Samuel, the coordinator for the Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Project, which is sponsored by the Pan American Health Organization, the Ministry of Health and Social Development, and the BVI Health Services Authority. Welcome back, Dr. Samuel.
Thank you, Natasha.
Well, as you know, we're here continue our conversation regarding building the mental capacity of persons, We are striving for mental balance and mental wellness. Today, I wanted to talk a bit about resilience. Now, you have this whole project, and the major goal of the project is to build resilience. So we want to give persons an idea of what resilience is and, trying to build that capacity so we all could strive for that mental wellness, right? So define for us, in a mental health and crisis situation, what is resilience?
Okay, Natasha, thanks. So resilience really speaks to the ability for an individual or for a group of people to respond to stressful situations in an adaptive way. So I could use an analogy. If you think of a rubber band and you stretch it and you stretch it and you stretch it. So the stretching of the rubber band is the crisis or the disaster that may be happening. But when you let go of the rubber band, it bounces back to its original shape, right? So for human beings and for populations, we can have any type of stressful situation. It can be, a family life situation. It can be an incident that happens to us, a change of life situation, change of situation. Or you could have major events like we had with Irma and Maria in 2017, which basically was a catastrophic disaster that affected a whole group of people. But in between there, of course, we live in the hurricane zone, we live in the earthquake zone. So every year we, look out for hurricanes. Ever so often, increasingly now, you're feeling more and more earth tremors. So those kinds of situations that we live with in our environment create a certain level of stress and anxiety. Okay? So resilience is the ability for individuals within those circumstances to cope with stress and adversity, and to essentially adapt in a healthy way, emotionally, behaviorally, from a psychosocial perspective. Okay, so we have all life experiences. We have to adapt to changes. Okay, and so resilience speaks to the ability of individuals to continuously adapt and adjust.
Wonderful. And you reference Maria. Would you say that the people of the BVI during that time were resilient?
I would say we have demonstrated over time our capacity for resilience. Of course, there are some persons who you could say probably are more resilient than others, depending on your experiences in life, depending on different factors, your personality, what you may have been exposed to previously. But generally speaking, the fact that 3 years, 4 years later, we're still here, and we are making every effort to rebuild. We were faced with the pandemic, because that's now another disaster on top of a community that was trying to rebuild. And we continue to strive and look for ways to develop and move forward. So as a community as a whole, we are demonstrating that ability to bounce back. The concern, of course, is at the individual level or even at the community level, making sure that, because obviously when you have disasters and crises, one of the things that will happen is you're going to have those individuals in the population who are more vulnerable, and therefore who might be more affected in various ways by these kinds of incidents. So, building resilience is about making sure that at individual and at the community level, you help persons to strengthen that capacity and understand what they can do for themselves to continue to build.
Mm-hmm. And after the storm, we saw communities emerging. Definitely that capacity building within the community was definitely displayed. So for the purpose of this, I want us to speak about that individual perspective. Mm-hmm. How would one person build their capacity for resilience individually? What are some of the characteristics they would need?
So in terms of building resilience, we have to look at the community as a whole, but from an individual level, you look at particular personality traits and skills that individuals can be taught to help them to respond to the situation that they may find themselves in, right? So any kind of incident, disaster, any type of crisis in our lives essentially evokes within all of us a stress response. And that stress response is what we have to teach persons to be able to identify and to be able to use various skills to help them to manage and monitor that response. Okay, so that is something that persons, a part of what this program is doing is looking at, how we teach individuals adaptive strategies. We teach them about stress awareness, and we talk about practicing particular kinds of techniques that helps us individually to counter the stress response that we may be feeling.
So what are some of these techniques and tips? What if I were a person, and what type of personalities would make us less resilient or more resilient? I want to get a better appreciation for that, and in terms of persons who could, build their awareness of certain things or build their capacity to, not fold every time there's a little inkling in the air, or, not really, turn their whole life side up. Because if you really look at it too, after Hurricane Irma and Maria, and even in this COVID era, we had a lot of deaths. We had a lot of deaths. A lot of people didn't handle it well. So what I really want to get to the bottom of is, those personality traits that you mentioned earlier. What make her, fold up right there and die, and, somebody else decide they're not dying and they getting through this. Talk a bit about that.
So the effect of stress is going to be different on different persons, and a part of we talk about an individual's the psychological strength. So we talk about persons who, whether based on previous experiences that they may have had, they've been able to tap into certain kinds of inner strengths, community strength to navigate through crises. We talk about we look at persons who may have particular perspectives or outlook on life. So often in these types of situations, persons may find themselves, for example, having negative thoughts, and they are basically caught up in the negative thoughts, or you see things in essentially a negative way, right? So part of what we help persons with is about how you reframe your experience, what you can learn from it, and then what things you can do to help you to, if you were to come into the same experience again, move forward differently. Persons who have certain kinds of pre-existing conditions would be more at risk. So if you have mental health disorders, you're going to be more at risk for suffering a negative impact from a crisis or a disaster. Persons who have chronic diseases would be more at risk. Okay, and because it is really about the effect of the stress response on your underlying medical condition. Okay, because it can aggravate that condition. It can aggravate your mental health issue if you have mental health issues. Okay, and then persons who may be in certain social situations, certain psychosocial situations where they're vulnerable already, and persons who are, socioeconomically are not well off, right? Persons who don't have a lot of social support. If you live in certain kinds of situations which are abusive, there's violence, where the family relationships are not very good. So it is a range of factors that speaks to where individuals may be at, and therefore when you have a crisis or a stressful situation, it will aggravate that particular aspect of your life. So that's why, when we talk about psychosocial, right, we talk about there's the psychological aspects, and then there's the social aspects of individuals and human beings. And when we are looking at disasters, we're looking at crises, we're looking at incidents that individuals may go through, it's going to be affecting them in one of these spheres. Okay, and therefore the responses that you teach persons are how to manage those particular situations.
That makes perfect sense. I just had an aha moment, because when we're talking about resilience, we're really talking about the whole person, basically. And it depends, like you were saying, on what's going on in that person's life, and that person's social community and everything. And that just opened my eyes to a lot of different things, even reflecting on my own life in terms of my personal resilience. And I could definitely see and feel the truth in that. So now when we're talking about resilience being based on so many different variables, and if you have one person who is perhaps in an abusive situation, or they're on the low end of the social economic ladder, or things on the job ain't going right, the tyranny, how can you be resilient in a situation like that?
And that is precisely the point, because you can be resilient. As a matter of fact, we've shown that we can be resilient because we are here. The majority of us are here, and really it is about, and that's what resilience programs are about, and there are various types of programs that you can do to help to raise persons' awareness, about all of these different factors. I've been doing a lot of discussion and teaching around stress management, and one of the things that I often say to persons or to groups is, we talk about stress, but if I ask you to say, well, what do you mean by stress? Persons are they don't really have a handle on it. They just know it is something they feel, or it's something in the air, right? But when we talk about stress, there's a certain level of stress awareness that we have to bring to individuals, because it is really about what your body is doing in response to your environment. And we have to teach individuals what that means. What does it feel like? What does it look like? How is your body saying to you that I am actually feeling stressed? Because that's different for everybody. And then more importantly, what do you do in response to that? And I think that is where the whole thing about resilience comes about, because it is about what we do to change that situation. Okay.
And that's the problem there,
Right.
Dr. Samuel, because people, and I've always had a problem with that. People always think they're so reactive, like they have no control and no power over their situation. Whatever happens to them is either, oh, better work at the devil or somebody else involved, other than themselves. And I think to build that resilience, right, you need to have that inner fortitude, and you have to have that self-empowering attitude, and stop using your power to lament and use your power to solve. And I think when people could get out of lamenting and oh poor me and oh them after me and oh everybody against me, to saying like they can't touch me, saying that I got this, I have the inner capabilities and capacity to bring myself out of this situation by my thoughts and actions alone. And I think if we could get across to the people, you will see a tremendous change in this place.
Absolutely. And I think because of the various crises that we've had recently, that is why there's been more and more discussion about resilience, more discussions about, actually more research around the area, really looking at this whole area of how do we teach people and teach communities how they can be resilient. When we talk about stress awareness, for example, there are, we're talking about relational issues, we're talking about behavioral, okay, we're talking about physical, emotional, and cognitive, meaning your thoughts, right? All of those, there are aspects in all of those areas that contribute to the stress response, right? And we have to be aware of, so for example, the thinking that you were just describing, which is a way of helplessness. I'm helpless to change my situation. Okay, that can be an individual who is in an extremely stressful situation, and therefore that is the mindset that they have, right? So one of the adaptive strategies is about how you help that person to reappraise what they're thinking, reappraise their situation, come up with a different perspective, which can be a positive perspective, and look at the supports around them to help them to move forward. Okay, but these are, I can't say that it is something that on a large scale you would have seen or heard previously, but now more and more you're seeing and hearing it, because there's the recognition that this is something that we need to bring to individuals and to communities. And that's what this project has been doing. So there's a community resilience piece, which is about people in communities. You have something in common in terms of your community getting together and developing the structures and the systems to help your community to be resilient for any situation. It doesn't have to be a disaster like Irma. It can be something as simple as, for example, growing gun violence. Okay, that is a situation that the community can respond to and develop, okay, how are we going to improve this and move past it, right? So any crisis or change in our situations, are where we need to be able to use this particular skill.
Wonderful. If you're just tuning in, you've got it locked and you're listening to Lyte Vibrations here on CBN FM 90.9 FM radio, here with Dr. June Samuel, here talking about the mental health and psychosocial support project, which is being sponsored by the Pan American Health Organization, the Ministry of Health and Social Development, and the BVI Health Services Authority. Today our topic is about resilience. Now, Dr. Samuel, we spoke at length about, community resilience. We talked about Irma Maria. What type of lessons did we learn, and how has that further helped us to build capacity moving forward since those hurricanes?
So the lessons learned, I think, from my perspective, and based on, I live in a community. So I think one of the biggest lessons that I would see is that we have to, we were prepared, but I wouldn't say we were prepared for every eventuality. And while that may be hard to do, I think having a catastrophic disaster like Irma Maria helped us to look at, okay, what do you do in a situation where you have an impact that affects everybody? Because that was the situation. You know, previously, you know, we've always been on the forefront of disaster management and disaster planning. But, you know, there was always this, you know, well, I haven't been through a situation where, you know, your responders even were affected at that level, right? And so I think one of the things that it has highlighted, and I think COVID is also bringing it out, it highlights the need for looking again at individuals' ability to cope mentally. So that whole mental health response, mental health in disasters, mental health in crises, and what we need to do to support individuals through those types of crises.
Mm-hmm. And before we run out of time, let's talk a bit about the children. Talk about their resilience, and you know, what do you think? Are children really more resilient? Were they even affected during those hurricanes, or even with COVID? Talk a bit about children and resilience.
So children will, we have to always remember the children, because often as adults, when we get into crisis situations, we are not always cognizant of the fact that children will be having their own responses as well to the situation, and their sense of security may be threatened, and there are certain things that we have to do to help children to feel safe and to feel that that they can move past this experience, right? So I think the resilience of children depends on how much we are able to support them. And we have to remember that children are always looking at us, the adults, in their environment, and they're looking at our responses, and our responses will affect them. So it's important to make sure that we speak to them, that we cater to them in whatever the responses are that we're having to make, that we're able to help them to understand what is happening in their world. So not using adult language, but you use tools to reach them, to help them to talk about their experience, talk about how they see the experience, and to interpret it, and essentially bring closure to it in a way that is healthy. Okay, so that reassurance, that sense of security and safety is important for children in disasters. So the most important thing is remembering that whatever programs we're doing, whatever responses we're putting in place, whether at home, in our schools, in the community, you have to make accommodation for children, because they will be affected as well.
Definitely, and we know that this project is a long-standing project which was started shortly after the hurricane. So talk a bit about the type of support that this project had for the children.
So for children, we brought support to teachers, so to persons working in the schools who would be working with the children. With a separate group, they essentially brought supports into the schools directly to the children. To the mental health unit, they were able to work a program or create a program that went into the schools to help teachers to understand how to work with children post disasters. And I know as well that there were also interventions done from other groups as well that use various tools, various activities to provide support for the children.
One of the key messages of this program, in one of the flyers that you have out, is that parents need to be aware that if they are stressed, their child is stressed too. And I think that would be one of the most challenging things for parents, because parents are under a lot of stress, like you said, they have the economic, the social, make it worse if they in like the job or they in a relationship, so how is it that a parent, while being stressed, could really care if their child is stressed or not? And how do we as parents, learn to be a little bit more supportive or understanding that, because we're stressed, we shouldn't take it out on the children, or that, they may be stressed too, or just making us more aware on a whole of the child's needs, even when we're suffering or going through tribulations.
So that would be a part of understanding about having stress awareness, your own response, right? Because when you start to look at the social effects, the social aspects as it relates to your stressful response, then you start to think about you in your family, okay? And therefore, what are the things then that you may need to support you in your response in your family? So it is really, I think it comes back down to being aware that yes, this is, okay, I'm shouting at the kids more, I'm snapping at them, you're hitting the kids unnecessarily, although you may think in your mind it's necessary, but it's really because you're more irritable and on edge. So being aware of that, because some parents don't have that level of awareness that, okay, this is a change in behavior. I don't normally behave like this. So something must be happening. And then taking the step to understand what is happening, what is causing you to behave in that way, and then taking steps to deal with that. And then while you try to deal with yourself, then figuring out and getting help in understanding, okay, what support do you need to bring to the children separately, because they may need a different type of support than you as an adult needs, right? So and as a parent, we all as parents want to be everything to our children, but we really can't be everything to our children. And we have to know when to reach out for help and support. And, within this community, there are various places that you can go to get support for children if they need it. The other thing that would be important as parents is to recognize when your child is showing signs, right, of being stressed. So you may notice, for example, your child is more withdrawn. They used to be bubbly, happy, chatty, and now that you notice that they're more withdrawn, they keep into themselves and not really talking. Some children regress, they start to bedwet, they get frightened or worried if there's a change in their environment, whereas previously, they were quite independent and outgoing. So if you notice changes, so part of the awareness is about being educated to the changes to look out for in your children. And the key messages around children is that children are not little adults. Children are human beings in their own right, and they need support for themselves as well.
Definitely. And I know one of my conscious decisions that I made, when I started having kids, is that I always said nobody or nothing is going to cause me to abuse my children. So I make a distinction. If I have any issues, I compartmentalize it and I leave it there. I don't bring home on the job. I don't bring the job home. I don't think about anything that upsets my spirit. At least I try. And I also taught them to save themselves too. If they see me in a rage, or if they see me in a kind of way, just save yourselves, keep out my way.
Yes.
And, and I think it's been working out. So I think those little things to make a conscious decision that you're not going to do it would also help.
And that again is one of the adaptive strategies that persons learn during resiliency training programs. So it's about, making intentional decisions about various things in your life, right? But it begins with awareness, because, and I always stress the point of awareness, because, I've seen even in this training that where we've trained several groups, and we do something called mindfulness, where we teach them some basics about mindfulness, right? And so they have some activities that they have to do, and they're surprised, like when they do the activity, you become aware of things in your environment that you wouldn't have been aware of, because we don't really pay attention and we don't focus.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a part of one of the strategies that persons will need to learn, that level of awareness and intentional decision making.
Wonderful, Dr. Samuel. Oh my God, our half an hour is up. It went by too quickly. We want to thank our listening audience. And Dr. Samuel, I want to thank you for coming on the program today to talk about resilience. And we'll see you again. Like we said, that this is a part of the mental health and psychosocial support project. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Samuel. She's going to be coming in here and teaching us all about how we can build mental wellness individually, as a community, and to also as a family. So join us again the same time next week here on CBN 90.9 FM as we continue these conversations. And once again, it's being sponsored by the Pan American Health Organization, the Ministry of Health and Social Development, and the BVI Health Services Authority. Thank you for tuning in. See you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to Light Vibration, and don't forget to tune in this time next week as we continue to bring you life-changing information. Until next time, shine your light.